Hey guys, Mike Givney here. We're going to tie this month's fly swap fly for OMTU. And this month it's a Sulphur Nymph. Obviously anybody who's tied Sulphur Nymphs in the past knows that there are a multitude of ways to tie these things. I'm going to do a simple one to start off with, just a basic pheasant tail nymph that imitates the sulphur. We're going to start off with a number 16 hook, and I'm just going to use a pale yellow thread. You can also use, which I think is more natural looking, an ultra thread in Wood Duck by UTC. That's a good thread too. I start off by waxing my thread with beeswax. Some threads come waxed. You don't have to wax them, but that comes from using silks on a lot of flies. First thing you want to do is wrap an underbody. Start a little ways behind the eye and wrap back to the point of the hook and remove your waist. The next step will be to tie in some kind of ribbing. Most folks will use gold wire. That's a great idea. Gold wire works well. I'm going to just use a piece of light colored thread for this video. And I'm going to try and make it simple for those who don't have a lot of materials to tie with. So I'm just going to use a piece of pale thread, tie that in like that. For the tails, I'm going to use bleached dyed ginger pheasant tail. This is a nice imitation of the color of the sulphurs that we have this time of year on the South Holston and the Watauga. I'm going to start off by pulling out approximately 5 fibers from the stem of the feather, bring them up 90 degrees away from the stem and pull them off, and that'll line up your tips. Now your tail should be about the length of your hook shank, so measure that out and then pinch it with your left hand or your opposite hand if you're left-handed. On your side of the hook, bring the feather up to the hook shank at about a 45-degree angle and give it one wrap. Keep tension on the thread, and you'll notice that will bring the fibers to the top of the hook. Then take and hold the tail fibers and bring your thread underneath and pull it forward slightly, and that will get your fibers to stand up. It gives it a little more natural look. Then take the remaining fibers and bring them up away from the hook shank at a 90-degree angle and wrap your thread forward to approximately the point halfway between the hook point and where you started your wraps. This will give you an opportunity to wrap the pheasant tail around the hook shank as a body material. Before I do that, I'm going to take a little bit of super glue, and I found this stuff. It's kind of cool. It's from Family Dollar. It was $2, and it's called Kiss Brush On Nail Glue, and if you read the label, it's a cyanoacrylate, I don't know if I said that right, cyanoacrylate glue, which is super glue. It's the same stuff as in the Loctite, and it comes with a brush. This is nice to just put a little dab on the thread where you're going to wrap your pheasant tail, and that will make it a lot less prone to breaking. And then take your pheasant tail and wrap it like you would any type of floss or body material. Touching turns as you go forward, and that'll give a nice segmented look to the body. You can use pliers for this. When you get to your thread, bring the fibers straight up and then take a hold of your thread, pull it out away from the fly, and bring the fibers forward. That will have the fibers crossing your thread and it'll lock right in. Give that 2 or 3 turns and clip off your excess. Then take your ribbing material, whether it be wire or thread or whatever you use, floss, and wrap it counter to the way you just wrapped your previous material. So you're going to come over the tail and give it probably 4 wraps forward. And what this does, if you're using gold tinsel, it will give a little bit of flash, but counter wrapping over the top of the pheasant tail will also lock it in. So if a fish hangs up on your pheasant tail with its teeth and it breaks the pheasant tail fiber, it'll stay in place. It won't stick out at odd angles. Again, wrap over this 3 or 4 times to lock it in place and trim off your excess. So there we have the body. We have a tail that's 4 fibers in this case, about the length of the shank of the hook. We have a body that's wrapped with pheasant tail, which is a very good imitator of the mottled light tan color of the Sulphur. And now we're going to put on a wing case. And for the wing case, we're going to use your same bleached dyed ginger pheasant tail. You can use a darker regular pheasant tail for this, but you'll want to take a larger number of fibers. So let's say a good 10, I would say. Let's call it 10. Pull them up 90 degrees from the stem of the hook. Pop them off. That's not super necessary for the wing case because you're going to trim it anyway. Now, if you'll notice on this ginger dyed pheasant tail, the tips are very light. The base is a little darker. I like using the base because it does give a little bit of contrast to the color. So what I like to do first is you have these little ratty ends where you pulled it away from the stem. I like to trim them off. I'll trim them straight across. And that'll give you this. And that will allow you to tie in to your hook. And I like to tie in right at the point where your pheasant tail body ends. So bring the pheasant tail case up to the hook shank, leave a little bit of space behind the eye on your side of the hook, and wrap over with 2 wraps. Now, before you go any farther, pull straight up on the pheasant tail fibers and give it 2 more wraps coming back, 3 wraps, back towards the bend of the hook. And what that'll do is center your case material on the top of the fly. Then you can come forward and wrap that all in, give it a nice base. Perfect. Okay, now we're gonna dub. For this fly, I'm not gonna tie in any legs because I'm gonna use a spiky, light hare's ear mixed with Spectra Blend. And that's what it's called, Spectra Blend Light Hare's Ear. So it has a little bit of shiny fiber in it, but the longer guard hairs that are in your hare's ear mix will act as legs. You'll see that in a moment. So take a little dubbing wax, wax about 1.5 inches or 2 inches of your thread, and take some hare's ear mixed with Spectra Blend. Now, because we're looking for a buggy thorax on this fly, we're not going to dub it like we do for the body of an emerger. So this is going to be a much looser dubbing because you want the fibers sticking out away from the thread. So what I'll do is what I call touch dubbing. Take a wad, a small wad of the hare's ear, touch it to the thread, and just give it a spin till it sticks a little bit. And that's all you want. Just a light twist on that to get it to stick to the thread. And you want fibers sticking out a little bit. All right. The next step is to wrap from front to back. Just let it wrap right on there. It's going to be a big old puffy wad puffy wad of dubbing. You can see the guard hairs sticking out all over the place. Now, you'll have them sticking forward of the eye, so you wanna fix that. Pull off the rest of the dubbing from the thread. Reach forward and pinch in front of the eye and slide your fingers back, and that will expose the eye of the hook. And you can give it 5 wraps or so to come back, and that'll push all those fibers back a little bit and open up the space between the dubbing and the eye of the hook. Then finally, you take your fibers from your pheasant tail and you bring them forward over the hook. Some folks will just wrap their thread over the top right here, and that makes for a tight wing case. I like to make the wing case a little more of a bubble, and I do that by pinching my fingernails together just forward of the eye, pushing back on it, and grabbing the eye with my fingernails. And that'll allow me to drop the thread over the top of the pheasant tail, and my fingernails keep it behind the eye of the hook. Now I give that 3 wraps over the top of the pheasant tail, holding the thread tight. I pull back on the pheasant tail and give it 3 more wraps in front. Let that hang. And then I'll take my scissors and cut that remaining pheasant tail as close as I can. And that will allow me to then take the cut ends, starting at the hook eye, and wrap back towards the wing case, and that'll catch most of them up. You may have a couple stragglers in the front, but this is a nymph, so it's not too bad. As long as your hook eye is clear, you can just trim them off. And then with these nymphs with the buggy, anything that's buggy, I found that the easiest way to varnish the head is to take your Sally Hansen's Hard as Nails and just apply a little bit of it, about 3/4 of an inch, to the thread itself. And that way, when you whip finish, you won't be dabbing varnish all over your dubbing. So then you tighten up your thread, clip that, and you'll notice that the body is pretty buggy. Looks like there's legs hanging out all over the place. Now that is really all you need for sulphurs. A nice thin body, a buggy thorax that allows you to give the impression of the legs and thorax on the actual bug, and that gives you a pretty good look at the bottom of the river. And I've had a lot of success with these flies by tying them off my bead head, tungsten bead head sulphur, so that one fly brings it down and this fly bounces around, imitating the active bugs that are hatching for some of the sulphurs. Some sulphurs hatch in slower water, some in the riffles, and depending on which one is hatching at the time, you may get a very active flow of nymphs towards the bottom of the river before they emerge. So I hope that helps. I'll do another one with a sulphur wing case to get the idea with that one.